Hey guys, Nick's here. So I just saw Ima Juno's Last Dipshit of the Week guest edition, number 21, via his Juno's Den channel, of course. And it's the original metalchik here. So I just went over and checked her out. I'd never heard of her before. And I watched her most recent video posted about a day ago. It's called Be Diligent. And I gotta tell you, man, she seems to want to go on about, the government brainwashing programs and stuff like that. Don't get me wrong. I'm not a big fan of the government, and I'll bet if they could brainwash us through our TVs, they probably would. But I don't think they can. That's a story for another day. So I'm going to do another point-by-point on her video, Be Diligent. I'm going to begin with the National Day of Prayer for Muslims. So I just did a very brief research on White House press release. What she's saying is that Obama says this is not a Christian nation, and therefore we'll no longer have a day of prayer, National Day of Prayer for Christians, but we'll have one for Muslims. Precursory research shows that this is not the case. Obama toned down the official presidential inclination towards the National Day of Prayer, saying things along the lines of, effectively, church and state. It's not his place or the government's place to be telling anyone to pray. As for the Muslims going to the White House, the leader of IslamonCapitolHill.com or whatever it is personally said that it wasn't sanctioned and that they're simply going to march on the White House. Now, since the White House is the seat of our nation's government, it's important that they don't sanction or censor such an event. So I don't see what that has to do with anything. If me and a bunch of my buddies want to go have a rally on the White House lawn, does that mean that Obama necessarily supports our view? It doesn't seem like it does to me. I'm afraid you're conflating the separation of church and state with Obama's mystical secret Muslim agenda, which is kind of ridiculous. I mean, you're basically calling him a flat-out liar. You're saying all of his aides are. The press secretary, I believe his name is Gibbs, Robert Gibbs, said in the beginning of one of the articles related to this issue that Obama prays every day, his family prays every day, and he has made a point of suggesting that he values prayer in his life, but has made a strong point in not broadcasting that this is a Christian nation. I'm sorry, metalchik, it's not a Christian nation. The separation of church and state is in the Constitution. Look it up. The government is not permitted to censor or sanction any individual religion over any other. They're not doing so, and to say this is a Christian nation is suggesting something that's both patently false and is against the doctrines laid out in that document. Okay, on we go. So I want to add one last little addendum to that bit there. You say that Obama would not recognize a National Day of Prayer for Christians. I'm curious to know what you're talking about, as the history, as easily laid out in any news article, of the National Day of Prayer was specifically designed for unity and the invite of all major religions. It was George Bush, actually, who had specific interfaith meetings that, while they were called interfaith, only involved different sects of Christianity, Catholicism, etc. So no, it's not rejecting a National Day of Prayer for Christians. It's removing government support of a religious action, which heretofore has involved everyone. And once again, if the Muslims want to go march on Capitol Hill, they can do it. If the Christians want to, they can do it. If the Jains want to, they can do it. But the White House should not be saying that they, as an entity, prefer one over any other. It's a violation of many of the things for which our country was built. Okay, next is going to be the hate crimes bill. Before we get into that, let's deal very briefly with the issue of the persecution of Christians. This is something that myself and many others have, of course, talked about at great length. The simple fact is that you need to open a dictionary, perhaps, and look up the definition of the word persecution. I personally feel that as soon as someone like yourself has implicitly or explicitly told me that I'm going to hell for not agreeing with them, I'm being persecuted, aren't I? No, you're trying to help me. So if I respond to you in a manner that is negative to your position, you say it's persecution, but you can go ahead and tell me all day long that I'm a godless heathen. That's not persecution? The simple fact is that, greatly unlike many of the civil rights movements in this country, we'll say the emancipation of blacks and the emancipation of women as relatively recent and major insights, they were going for equal rights. You're not going for equal rights. You're going for superior and superlative rights. You're trying to say, basically, that Christianity should be held to the highest echelons of our society, that everyone should be taught it, that it's just plain the way it's supposed to go. Now, beyond separation of church and state, you can't say we're persecuting you when we're trying to deny you rights above and beyond that of the general populace. It's not persecution to demand equality, which is effectively what atheists are doing by and large. We're saying that nobody forces a religion down your throat except at home, not in school. When folks say, they're just trying to prevent kids from learning about Jesus. Now, you can teach your kids about Jesus all you like in the living room, but don't put it down the throat of school kids, because it's not fair and it's not constitutional. Before the inevitable knee-jerk response comes, I'll just say that no, evolution is not a religion scientifically supported by mountains of evidence, and in school, we teach what's supported by evidence. Next point, we're going to go on to the hate crimes bill here. I just see the very beginning of your screen here, a little text on it, saying that it's become a hate crime for a pastor to say homosexuality is an abomination in the eyes of God. Yeah, that sounds pretty much like hate speech. So, I'm rewatching. I went through once quick, and I'm rewatching for the point-by-point. A little later in the video, I believe you say something along the lines of, I don't care if you're black or white or whatever, but you do care if I'm gay. I happen not to be gay, but I fight tooth and nail for gay rights. So, why is it okay to discriminate against gays, but not against a specific race? One is what? Told to you by your God in your book. That's it. So that just invalidates the hate crime thing. If I come out in the street and say, goddamn chink die, that's hate speech, damn it. And if you come out and say homosexuality is evil and it makes you disgusting and filthy, that's hate speech by the same definition. I don't see how you could possibly draw a line between the two. If a pastor wants to say that homosexuality is a sin during a religious service at his church, that is entirely different from coming out and doing it on the street where it's broadcast to an unwilling public, especially when it's hateful and bigoted like that. I'm sorry. To say that you can be whatever race you want and that's fine, but your sexual orientation is a different story altogether, that is hate speech. I think that about does it for hate speech. Let's move quickly on to Acorn, though you didn't really transition it, so I'm not sure if you're intending for them to be related, but I guess we'll get to that as we go on. Just say flat out, I agree with you 100% that the actions of the filmed Acorn representatives were atrocious and abominable, repugnant, and should never be allowed, and they should be sacked and proverbially tarred and feathered. The simple facts are, though, one, I feel like everybody's conflating 1 or 3 or 10 Acorn employees as somehow meaning the entire organization is corrupt. Now, that may be the case, but you can't say that because one employee of a company performs an illegal action that the company sanctions that action. You can't do so. Also, I'm really curious as to if there's maybe 5 or there's, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's about half a dozen Acorn offices where similar scenes were played out. I wonder how many ones they were kicked out of. I mean, there's a lot more Acorn offices around the country that obviously didn't do this kind of thing, or they'd be on video too. So taking a selective sample doesn't really give us the perfect impression of the larger picture. Now, like I said, I find what they did abominable, and that's that. But please, people, stop pointing out that Obama is associated with Acorn. What the hell? Find any president who's going to be associated with some kind of business before he got there. And just because that business does something illegal or shady or crooked or whatever doesn't necessarily mean the president, or not then president, had anything to do with it. Hell, George Bush made his money and the Bush family worked with Osama bin Laden for a while. So by your logic, we could immediately discredit him too, couldn't we? Actually, I suppose I should ask first if you're actually a fan of President George W. Bush, because I don't know if you are. Okay, so I think that about covers it for Acorn, too. I'm sorry. I forgot. You started by saying the media isn't covering it. That's nonsense. A quick YouTube search can find all major news networks covering it, as well as Jon Stewart and Bill Maher and every pundit out there's covered it, all of them. And they covered it within days of it happening. So, no media coverage, huh? Patently false. To finish up on that thought, what was it you said next? Media coverage, and they're trying to, one state is trying to suppress the evidence. Now, I personally think it's good that something this heinous would come to light for the general populace, but it's illegal to wear a wiretap into a building and record people without their consent. You can't do that without a warrant. That's not infringing freedom of speech, like you're saying, the marches and, oh yes, they're impeding our freedom of speech. Wait, and yet they allowed the 2 million people to go march or whatnot. I mean, that's obviously not impeding freedom of speech. And neither is this. What this is enforcing the law. We have laws for due process to ensure that the ends do not justify the means. I think it is good that we all saw what happened in those Acorn offices, but that doesn't mean that it wasn't illegally obtained. And if it was illegally obtained, they can't silence it from the public forum, but they can say it's not legally admissible. That's all there is to it. If the cops illegally break into your house and find drugs or something, they can't use the drugs as evidence. Why? Because they illegally broke into your house. This is to protect us from the exact same sort of government tyranny that you're implying as we speak. All right, let's go on to the next point, shall we?